little bit about why you were interested in this project.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times or if ever I've heard the church ask to thank God for sex, and so there's something very inspiring and hopeful, and even there's something mysterious about it. It feels amazing to think about this idea of even worship in thanking God for something that I have been taught to stay away from or to hold at arm's length. And so I was really excited to think about the idea of letting sex be a part of the conversation with God that is worshipful and beautiful and not shame-filled.
Talk a little bit about some of the messages that you got as you were growing up and their effect on you.
Mm-hmm. I was taught that I'd be okay if I was asexual, basically. And so that's the road I took, was that if I didn't care about it, or I didn't need it, or I didn't even listen to my body, or wasn't interested or didn't learn about my body, that I was going to be okay. I was going to make it through somehow if I could cut off desire and this idea of pleasure, or even intrigue into my sexuality. And so, in fact, I just cut it off. Asexuality was the holiest, and I had somehow achieved it. So I was more holy as long as I could not care about it or not even think about it. I even remember driving after my wedding night, and I was crying. I was in tears because I thought that I would somehow be less righteous or less holy after this night, somehow. After sex would be a part of my life, that somehow I was cut from the team, or somehow less holy than what this ideal was. I would have less to say, or less of a pulpit to stand on. It was a really hard transition for me to think of it as beautiful or glorious or holy or something that God even liked.
Did it have an effect on how you felt about yourself, your body, you as a woman, men, gender, relationships?
Yeah, I think it's still having an effect. I think to go from almost telling yourself to be asexual, to not care about sexuality, to then step into a world of sexuality, there was no trust in my own body, which is what I think is so important in a sexual relationship, because if you don't trust your body, if you don't trust the roadmap to pleasure, then you don't even know how to invite the other into it. And I didn't even know my own body. I'd cut that off so long ago, and so I was walking in without any idea how to offer that to someone, or even to offer it to myself. The work is still being done, I think, 4 years into a committed sexual relationship. I'm still learning how to be a sexual being and how to trust my body in that place. So it definitely affected me.
Did it affect how you thought about men?
Yeah, I think it possibly taught me that men had the understanding of what it was supposed to be, or that they would lead, or that was something that they were more familiar with, or kind of even the stereotype that men were more sexual beings. And so there was less room for me to step into or explore or trust myself as a sexual being, and to trust my sexuality. Even the idea that once you give yourself to someone, that somehow when you've given them your sexuality, they take it with them, instead of every time I leave a sexual encounter, it's my sexuality that comes back with me. And I didn't know that, and I had to learn that, and possibly still learning that somehow.
Can you talk a little bit about the journey you've been on to begin to reclaim your sexuality as something that is different than what you were taught growing up?
I think in my own personal story, I was exposed to men always being the promiscuous or the sexual of the two genders. And so, oh, Tina, I forgot the question. Mm-hmm. I started it and then I forgot what I was saying.
I'm wondering about the journey that you've been on to reclaim it, to see it as something other than what you were originally told. You know, that you've been on this other journey now for a bit. And
yeah, I flash back to as a child and this idea of my parents being divorced and it being because of adultery. So the idea of male being promiscuous, and then the church stepping in and saying sexuality is shameful and having sex before marriage is shameful. And so there was never an understanding of even, I had all these stereotypes to grasp from, or even just my own parents' story. And so there was something in the idea of men being promiscuous and women having to somehow fulfill their appetite or their sexual appetite. And so I was under the impression, probably for most of my life, that I needed to be a woman who knew how to sexually please a man, and I needed to figure that out, or else I would lose them. Now I'm having to learn painfully how to trust and how to let men and not just take on a role of being a overly sexual being, and that women have just as much equality in sexuality. And so I'm having to learn how to then trust myself and my sexuality and be able to bring that to the table, and trust men to have a higher standard for sexuality and a deeper understanding for it. And there's good days and bad days of that. I don't know that I've gotten there. It'd be interesting to think of what my husband would say about that, where I've gotten in that.
Yeah. Do you find God in your sexuality now in times? Does God show up in ways now, in surprising ways? Because it sounds like as you were growing up, the way that you were taught, God was nowhere to be seen, like you imagined in it. I'm just curious in your reclaiming process if God is showing up or spirituality is showing up in.
Yeah, definitely, even in my own pleasure, my own body, in the beauty of it. A God who could make my body feel that way, or even invite you into sharing that with someone. Those just really amazing moments with both laughter and heartache. I mean, just such an intimate place. It feels like I definitely see God in glimpses and am intrigued by a God that I don't know or haven't known, and that feels nice, even after years of faith, to be intrigued to know a God who created this act. It's kind of fun.
It sounds surprising to you.
Yeah, definitely surprising.
What have you come, or are you beginning to come to believe is God's intent in the gift, in this gift of sexuality, sexual desire, sexual communion?
Maybe I'm not there yet. Maybe that's why when you say that, I think I can't fathom even yet. Like God's just become okay with this topic and in my story. And so, man, I don't know that I can fathom. I think once I was asked to fathom what I will look like in heaven, and I talked about my body being an entire instrument. And so maybe, and when I would fly, that even my hair would be like guitar strings that would just make this music, and my lungs. And so if I could even fathom sex in that sense of what it is like to enter and to make music, and to in a heavenly sense, like beyond what I've even fathomed is on this earth. I don't know, it just feels way bigger than me. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited to have that context. I'm excited to have that to think about or to even dream about, because I don't know that I ever had it before. Mm-hmm. I'm often aware of my finite mind of this place, and so maybe that's how I feel about what sex was really meant for, is that maybe my mind is just finite and I'm just beginning to be safe enough to explore what it might look like, or what it was meant for beyond what I've ever been taught or told.
Mm-hmm. What's your hope for kids that are coming up now? You know, what's your hope for Wilder? You know, as he comes up and, you know, he's going to have a different story. What's your hope for him to learn of body, intent, and gender, and God, and this power that's going to be surging in his creativity and his passion?
Yeah. When I think about another generation growing up, either within the church, or even I think about my son and raising him in our family, like I want there to be play and imagination. I want to be able to think it's bigger than, I guess what I alluded to before, I want it to be so much bigger than what I've ever thought it to be. And so I almost want to learn from someone who wasn't given constraints, in a sense. Blessing the body, trusting your body. I talk so much about trusting your gut, but just trusting your body. Trusting when it says something is good, trusting when it says something isn't. And I just think that feels so much kinder, so much freer. And the idea of that being my household, or a place where my own children feel like they can bless their bodies and they can trust their bodies and they can be kind to them. Gosh, I will advocate for that world in my home. And that feels really exciting. That feels really hopeful. Mm-hmm.